There he goes, little Marco, sneaking out. Industries that have been under sharp focus for cases of elder abuse and blatant rip-offs in recent times.
Now, this week, the retirement village sector has been the subject of media investigations, revealing the high financial costs to residents who have to move out. The investigations have prompted calls for more inquiries, but industry insiders say that there have been enough reviews and now it is simply time for action.
Well, as the population grows older, the problem gets bigger. So to wade through it all and to help figure out how you can find the best solutions, we're joined by lawyer Peter Hill. Peter, good morning to you, who's an expert in this field, and Tim Allerton, who's usually here talking about advertising, but whose family has seen the dark side of retirement villages, and aged care advocate Dr Sarah Russell, who's in Victoria. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Peter, let's start with you. This week, large retirement village operators have been exposed, essentially. Now we're hearing that it is time for things to change and for action to come about. What sort of action needs to happen? Because the allegations are horrific.
I think there needs to be a national framework of retirement village regulation. We've got this hopscotch of state-based regulation. All the states have different acts. We have a situation where we've got large exit fees that have been under the contracts that have been taken by operators.
Sometimes they can be up to 40%.
That's right, that's right. All of the legislation across the country in all of the various states, it's passive on exit fees in terms of any caps. There are no caps on exit fees. And I think that's one of the big issues that has to be looked at. In 2007, the parliamentary inquiry, that's a decade ago, looked at this issue and recommended that the ACCC look at seeing what they could do around exit fees and possibly review to see if there should be a cap. I think it makes sense. Obviously, the operators will think otherwise, but the problem is a lot of these elderly people, they're pensioners or part pensioners. They're not rich people. They come to these villages and they need to fund the next level of care. And the next level of care is usually a bond in a nursing home or some other higher accommodation. And if a good part of their sovereign wealth is being taken by operators under these contracts, then where's it going to fall on? Ultimately, if they don't have the money to pay a bond for a nursing home in the next level of care, it'll fall on the taxpayer. So I think it's not only a fairness question, it's an issue also of resourcing in the aged care area.
Yeah. Tim, you're normally here to comment on advertising, but you've had a very unfortunate situation happen with your aunt who was locked into a situation, and then it was after her death that you realised just how much her and the family were getting stung.
Yeah, the ingoing contribution was $250,000. She would have spent in capital expenditure over that time probably another $50 to make it $300, and the estate ended up with $94,000. They took a departure fee, it's called, of over $100,000 on the basis that she was leaving the village and we couldn't sell the apartment. They weren't selling the apartment, and just took that out. And I'm not saying it's illegal, it's just part of the contract, but it was 172 pages long.
And the other thing about this is you're a highly educated person, you're in the corporate world, and you had difficulty to navigate this. And a lot of people don't have family that can help them.
Yeah, I mean, the wording, the jargon, the acronyms were so complex that you would need a top-flight lawyer to actually understand.
Apparently the fine print is absolutely horrendous. It's no surprise that the Four Corners program on Monday night was one of their highest rating of the year. In fact, for many years. I think one thing as Australians we really despise is exploitation of our elderly when they're at the end of their lives, when they've contributed so much, and then we treat them in this way. It really...
And look, a lot of people aren't at the end of their lives at all. In fact, they're still feeling like they're very much in their prime.
Sarah, your organisation, Aged Care Matters, deals with people who have moved from retirement villages into aged care facilities. How difficult is that transition from one to the other for the residents, and does it leave them more vulnerable to financial exploitation?
Look, it's a very difficult transition often because the older person often faces some sort of crisis in the retirement village. It might be a health crisis, it might be dementia getting worse and the family are worried about the person staying at home alone. They may be recently widowed, or they may have had a fall and ended up in hospital, and the hospital thinks it's best for them to go into aged care, as into an aged care home. Now, the family is in crisis and they're trying to make a decision on the hop because it hasn't been thought about in advance. And they are very vulnerable because the contracts are complex, as it's already been said, and they may sign themselves into something they hadn't really anticipated because they're so stressed at the time.
Yeah. Sarah...
So they're very vulnerable.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, we just a couple of weeks ago did a story about rip-offs in the funeral industry, because you're really getting people at their most vulnerable, you know, and trying to make the right decisions. Sarah, what do you see as the solution here? How can we go about bringing about some change for the good of everyone?
Well, first of all, we have to respect older people. I mean, as you've said earlier, they've contributed so much. We want our parents and our grandparents to live the rest of their lives in a happy, fulfilling way. And the problem is we've moved into this unregulated sector where there are very good operators working very hard to provide good care for older people, but there are also unscrupulous providers, and they are ripping people off, not just financially, but they're also providing not enough staff to look after them, not enough care. And it's a terrible thing when you see your parent or your grandparent not being looked after well. It's actually heartbreaking. And I think that's why this is getting so much publicity now, because the baby boomers are about to enter this sector, and it's become an industry where there is money, and it's just become a sector that needs a lot of attention.
Yeah, it does. Sarah, thank you.
Yeah, when you were talking about people feeling trapped once they're in there and then they have these hefty exit fees, Tim, in your situation, the company said, oh, we really need to sell it for you. And after some pretty good detective work, you sort of worked out that they were not showing the apartment at its best because they wanted to buy the place back themselves at a much reduced rate.
I think they just had other properties to sell, and they just found more profit in that than my auntie's apartment, which was left vacant basically for a year.
Peter, Tim, Sarah, thank you. It's important that we talk about it. I think the good thing out of a session like this morning and Four Corners on Monday night is it's back on the agenda.
Yep.
And people will look and get some help to look, because as we've said, the one thing we hate in this country is exploitation of our elderly, and hopefully it stops now.
Yeah, that was a joint investigation between Four Corners and Fairfax. Thanks you all so much.
Thanks, guys.
Now for something